Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series Forgotten Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 79.5, Flesh and Iron. Mechanicus, the first butcher. It was time. The Holy Creator, the Grand Master of the Butcher Cherrygions, ordered them to use their skills to the fullest. The fate of the world hanged on the tips of their claws. It was a great undertaking, and even a greater honor to be allowed to make their mark on the future. And Mechanicus was not ready. His soul was full of shame as he sighed, glaring at his trembling flesh and pathetic machine supporting its conscious existence. He was not going to be enough, and the price of failure would be too much to bear, both for him and for his kin. His brothers hummed in the room's background, their deep voices and smell of incense filling the air with visions. He sacrificed a moment to think about those who provided these rare items, their lesser thiefkin, the Rattlings, the firstborn of their creator, skilled in subterfuge diplomacy, and caked in blood of both their own and the relentless invaders. Rattlings, the unrelenting, the monstrous, the discoverers of the warpstone. Mechanicus dipped his head in silent prayer before returning to his ruminations. The place he chose was a small but cozy nook located on the 4th floor of the dungeon. It has been co-opted as a one-of-a-kind chapel and a place of reflection. With the help of the silent drones, they built up the walls and decorated the remaining space with a short history of spider walkers. Despite their constant duties, a pair of butchers was always stationed near the entrance, guarding their heritage. The delvers never managed to penetrate this deep into the dungeon's bowels, but discretion was the better part of valor. Mechanicus's form was taking up most of the room, his mechanical carriage's legs curled up under the metal surface, not dissimilar to how a dead spider looked. Around him, a few off-duty butchers prayed, their reptilian heads bowed in supplication, eyes closed. The first of the Cherrygians scoffed. Their pale tribe cobalt ancestry was a weakness, their flesh twisted and atrophied, forced to rely on machines to barely meet the standards of usefulness. This was of course not their creator's fault, but a trial given to the faithful in order to grow more powerful and weed out those lacking the required resolve. Still, because of these inherent traits, their pilgrimage to the top stung hard with each step, but they would be rewarded once it was finished. This line of thought turned Mechanicus's gaze towards the nearby syringe, full of the brightly glowing green goo. The item was kept upright by two-pronged metal poles, begging to be used. The container was a specialized thing, longer and sharper than its counterparts, and as he gazed at its sleek form, the words adrenaline needle appeared in his mind unbidden. He shook his thoughts away. Normally, such bestowal of the Creator's knowledge would be a boon worth celebrating, and most certainly worth to be added to their repository. But right now, he was focused on his task, ready to fulfill his destiny or die trying. And if he somehow failed the task, his successor would try again, and so would one that came after him, until nothing remained to the bushes but ashes. Such was their dedication, a timeless promise to their Creator, to do better, to achieve new heights. After all, the subpar creation was bound to be abandoned, and it would be better to perish than to suffer that fate. The liquid bubbled menacingly, and Mechanicus sighed, lifting the syringe up to the level of his eyes, the mechanical arms clacking and clicked as they worked, tenderly grasping at the ticket to their bright future. Or death. That was always an option in the Creator Uno dungeon. The green solution was the purest variety, without any additional filthy DNA thrown into the mix, with a 90% saturation content. Internally, it was called Compound F1 90% and was one of the potions with the highest failure rate. Not counting the experiments with the combining living humans with locally sourced undead. Those tended to end explosively. Cleaning up vomit, viscera, and meat chunks was always such a chore. Mechanicus squinted as the humming took more of an important tone. It seemed like his brothers were growing weary of the hesitation shown by their leader. With a solemn nod, the butcher straightened up, his mechanical parts whirring as the spider legs scrambled frantically to raise up the pale-faced lizard controlling them. He scoffed at the twisted reflection of his snout visible in the glass part of the syringe. "May the Creator bless us, brothers." "May he bless us," the countless voices repeated. "For we are his children, his scalpel and his spear. We are the light in the darkness of ignorance, and a way forward in the labyrinth of despair. We are his chosen kin, and those who will evolve from their base form, showing the world wisdom of our Creator." The hot, heavy silence surrounded both Mechanicus and his fellow butchers. The smoke and smell of the incense filled every corner of the room, slowly surrounding everyone present. "We are the Butcher Cherokeans, and we will be more." With a last roar, Mechanicus lifted the syringe into the air before plunging it deep into his chest, deep enough to reach his heart, and reach it did. There was a sting of pain when the flesh parted under the forceful iron, then the hot sensation as the liquid was deposited near and into the life-giving organ. Ignoring his aching body, Mechanicus squeezed, letting the rest of the solution flow inside. Another alien word flashed before his eye, seppuku, with the connotation of death, honor, and solemnity condensed into one. He bowed his head for this gift of knowledge, before removing the syringe from his quaking flesh. The blood that flowed was red, thick, and viscous, but the bleeding stopped moments later, when the solution's healing properties were activated. The seconds passed during a tense wait, interrupted only by the humming of his peers. Those too tired to continue the ceremony left their places, only for them to be immediately replaced by bright-eyed newcomers observing Mechanicus's trial. The weight of their expectations continued to keep him focused, even as the first signs of change tore through his body. The butcher's gut churned with unease, which soon turned into pain. It was a sharp, cruel thing, poking holes in his facade, the spikes of torture tearing bones, tendons, and organs from their usual places. And then the slithering started. The usually passive metal comprising large parts of his body started to flow like water, before twisting into fluid tentacles, dissolving more and more of the delicate parts of his carrier. Soon the spider-like legs bucked under the pressure, and the complicated systems of pulleys and clockworks turned liquid. It was, however, only when the metal started to bore into his body that Mechanicus started to scream. The earlier inconveniences were just an appetizer before the real transformation. His howls turned more and more animalistic as the cold, unfeeling metal tried to replace his bones and even his skin. The screams turned into gurgling when the fluid metal came up to his face and then covered it whole, with a few last splutters being an only remembrance of the one who led the Butcher Cherokeans. What remained was only a slick azure cocoon made out of metal. It trembled from time to time, slowly growing more and more still. Around it, the butchers continued their humming, not willing to believe that the proudest of them all was so easily felled. The situation continued for hours, as the light of hope in their eyes was slowly glowing dimmer. It was about 10 hours later that the cocoon started trembling, its still form regaining earlier passion, before the noise peaked and the shell cracked in half. From the tear a slick and thin leg emerged, one made completely from metal, yet showing a shockingly organic build. No clockwork or pulleys were hidden inside. It was just muscle, bone, and blood, all of them constructed of intricately connected iron and flesh. A moment later, 4 metal tentacles followed the hesitant leg, tearing the cocoon wider and allowing the creature hidden inside to fully emerge before the hushed whispers of the butcher kin. The form that their leader took was breathtaking. Instead of the earlier palanquin-like structure, where atrophied flesh was being carried by a metal machine, now the pale tri-body had been fully integrated, sticking out from the front like some kind of iron centaur. Its chest, arms, and legs were muscular and coated in blue skin, while its head had been covered by something that Una would recognize as a gas mask, completed with 2 eye holes and a filtration unit located at the lower portion of the face. From the creature's back, 4 tentacles sprung to life, each ending in a claw-like 3-fingered appendage, easily able to both tear down its enemies and perform more delicate tasks. The lower part of it being was of that of a spider, with an oval shape, metallic sheen, a center of gravity close to the ground, and 8 spindly legs. The being hesitated before coming out into full view of its kin. Yet this shyness didn't last long, as 2 of the surrounding butchers carried a red cloak in their appendages and cautiously lifted it up on their leader's shoulders. After a moment, his own tentacles did the job of covering the blue but bare body with a modest garb. Mechanicus grinned at his new improved form, even if no one could tell with the changes to his physique, and yelled into the dungeon ceiling, all the while raising his hands in triumph. "I am reborn!" The screams of his kin followed. If Uno had noticed the commotion, he would be surprised by his follower's newest evolution. Butcher kin Drider, called Mechanicus. Unlike their lesser kin, the Butcher Drider is a being of magic, bathed in metal mana and shaped by it. Its earlier tenuous grasp and iron augmentation changes into a more intuitive, sleek, and powerful form. While retaining its spider-like look, a Drider's main avenues of attack change to 4 dexterous tentacles and 2 powerful arms. It is, however, not a frontline fighter, but a supporter and a mage of metal, intuitively using the new form to serve its chosen master. Driders are a combination of monster between a spider and another race, often an effect of otherworldly rituals, turning willing or unwilling victims into one. Drider race doesn't exist anymore, as the magic required to create them is no longer in the hands of mortals. Threat level C. The celebrations lasted longer than expected, but soon turned into a solemn feeding shared by all of the servants present. The butcher chirurgeons were ready to finish the quest given by them by the dungeon call and their only master, Uno, to save a life using their considerable healing skills. Earlier, he was full of doubts, but now Mechanicus felt more than ready and eager to test the limits of his new flesh. The procession they formed was an instinctual thing. Nobody needed to tell the monsters what to do and where to stand. A few leapers walked in the front, followed by Mechanicus and a few of his closest aides. Behind them, an orderly group of Spider Walker soldiers, generals, and butchers followed, as both defensive force and spectators. It took only a few minutes to arrive at the operating theater. The doors were flanked by human soldiers, despite their mere presence being a blasphemy to the Creator. A few of the butcher leader aides twisted their snouts in displeasure, but a simple gesture calmed down their nerves. After all, the newly born Drider could easily smell how terrified the soldiers were. Under their professional facade, a thick stench of fear covered the entrance, and Mechanicus drank deep from its well. The procession fractured, as only a few butchers and generals were allowed inside the room. It was a concession towards assuaging the surface's nervousness, but this deep into the dungeon, it didn't matter. Even the walls were claimed by their master, and both humans and monsters knew that. Still, some decorum had to be expected. Mechanicus strode into the room, taking in the collection of sharp implements hung on a nearby rack. From butchers' knives, carving implements, scalpels, and other instruments needed to shape flesh or bone, there was something for everyone just waiting to be used. And in the middle, a large slab-like operating table was visible, with leather restraints prepared to keep the head, legs, and arms in place. The humans scoffed at such preparations, but Butcherkin insisted on them for safety, both their own and their charge. The parasite removal was tricky business, and none of the responsible wanted to fail. The procedure had to be observed and precautions taken. Such was the way of the butcher Charikians. Apart from these items, the room was filled with a pair of jerry-rigged machines and 2 glass containers. The first of them, a bigger one, was reinforced to the limit, and the second one was filled with solution B160%, or rejuvenation tonic, as their patient called it. The most important pieces were, however, 2 banged-up machines. Their looks didn't gather any confidence, but it didn't matter. What was important were the abilities they bestowed upon their users. The first one was a simple thing. It just displayed the amount and type of mana available in the air or in the patient's flesh. Well, for humans it could be revolutionary, but dungeon monsters had no need for such technology. Right now, it was helpful to know when to not overwhelm the patient with magic. The second machine allowed its operator to diagnose the level of cellular destruction in the patient. It was a technology made possible by countless sacrifices of their test subjects, especially the ones fed with undead spiked solution. Both pieces were flanked by the ratlings, as they were the only ones capable of working them. Additionally, a secret council rat was overseeing the technicians, being in charge of both keeping the machines running and communicating, which meant talking to humans and monsters alike. The rat in question had a curious look, not dissimilar from Mechanicus's own, with mechanical arms located on its back, constantly twitching and clasping at invisible foe. Locating the tools he needed was enough, and the Drider decided to start his own preparations. He dredged through the required medications, straightening up the control over his additional appendages and his mental defenses. As expected, the new body he was granted was agile, strong, and easy to control. The humans didn't hurry at all, and it was hours before the patient had been brought down into the dungeon's deepest rooms. Surprisingly, the person accompanying the girl wasn't the red-haired and red-souled mage always been bantering with the creator, but rather an older, bald man, suffused with a scholarly aura. Mechanicus remembered that his name was Vincent, but his followers mostly called him Master Vincent, denoting some degree of skill. Skill in what? The Drider wasn't privy to that information, and neither did he care. All his senses were instead focused on the child before him, an unconscious girl called Agnes. Her blonde, boyish hair gave her an aura of innocence and liveliness, barely broken by the expression of pain visible on her face. The monster, however, wasn't distracted by her cuteness, but instead focused on the movement of her limbs, her breathing, and similar tells, trying to discern the level of the parasite's control. The first analysis was not good. Even though the girl was asleep, her arms and legs were moving, grasping, as if something under her skin tried to understand why its host was being moved. Agnes's eyes, while closed, constantly moved too, just like one would do in a deep dream. Except she wasn't dreaming, but had been sedated. As Mechanicus focused on the patient being secure to the table, a monstrous intent slammed into his very being. The attention of his dungeon core, the attention of his god. "Are you ready?" came the not speech, and every dungeon creature in the room stilled. Then, as one, they responded. Rattlings with chattering, butchers with clicking, and Libras, the brainless mass that they were, with grunts. These sounds all translated into one sentence. "We're ready, master." "Proceed then. Make me proud." "Your will be done," Mechanicus clicked. Then he turned towards the rat. "Translate, friend." Seeing the creature bow in acceptance, he continued. "We're going to operate on your friend. It may be bloody, but we're not going to hurt her. Do not interrupt us, or you'll incur not only our wrath, but also the wrath of our master." The human nodded, clearly unimpressed, but had questions of his own. Yes, understood. Now tell me, what are you? I've only seen something similar to your kind in books of lore, old ones, too." When the monster hesitated, another voice joined the conversation. "He's a Drider, a first of his kind. Aren't they cool?" His master's joyous tones sent chills of happiness crawling up Mechanicus' spine. The mechanical wonder he called a megaphone served as a tool with outsiders. "An evolution of the butchers you see all around you." "I see. Thank you for your explanation, Uno." The old man's eyes shined with curiosity. "I've only heard of Driders when dark elves were mentioned, and it's hard to gather any credible information about them." "Oh, and why is that?" "Most of their cities were destroyed by both the elven theocracy and their half-elven brethren. Their royalty, nobility, and soldiers were slaughtered without mercy. Their circles of magi burned to the ground, their practices forgotten. And without their protection, the Dark Elves, or Drow as they called themselves, were no more." Master Vincent mused for a long while before continuing. "This turned out to be a mistake, since without their reluctant help, dwarven kingdoms had fallen one by one to the monster invasion. Their sun-blessed allies were useless in the deep tunnels, after all." He chuckled darkly. "Interesting. Thank you for sharing." The happy-go-lucky tone of his master didn't change despite the revelations. Honestly, it was sometimes terrifying how easily their creator could ignore things. We have work to do, though. Mechanicus, please continue. Yes, master. The Drider clicked with happiness, ignoring the Major's grumblings about another named monster. It was time to start. The parasite is hidden under the right part of her skull, Mechanicus intoned. Disinfect the flesh, shave the excess hair. The lesser butchers instantly moved to fulfill his demands. The observing humans clenched his fists, but let the monsters do their job. Prepare for cutting. Ready, one of the lesser butchers chittered, their scalpels flitting in the air like flies. Cut. Done. Done. Detach skin. A strange electric noise spread through the air. Skin detached. Prepare for bone cutting. Mechanicus's own appendages appeared in the appropriate places, ready to saw through the right half of the bone plate. Their magic turned, twisting the shape of metal into whatever the mage desired. Cutting, first phase. There was a clack as the iron went through the organic matter. Cleaning needed. Cleaning done. An answer came and went. Cutting, second phase. After a moment, the bone faltered and came off cleanly. Mechanicus cautiously lifted the remaining piece and turned it over to his assistant. Put it in a solution to soak. We should be able to save or regrow her nerves. He was trying to continue when a sharp gasp disrupted his concentration. What in Brighton's name is that? The human mage pointed to a parasite curled near the patient's brain. It looked like a long worm, with a segmented body and a flower-like head filled with teeth. The thing twisted, undulating, as if slowly coming out of the stasis. It's the gift from your precious Gaynard kingdom, the dungeon core gloated. Isn't it beautiful? Uno asked sweetly, not waiting for an answer. His attention turned towards the surgeon. Get rid of it. At once. Using his many appendages, Mechanicus untangled the beast from the girl's trachea and then yanked it off the brain. Agnes sighed with relief as soon as the pressure on her eye was relieved, her form growing more relaxed. Put it in the container, the Drider ordered his assistants, and soon the flower spawn had been secured nearby. And so it was time for the hardest part. Reseal the wound. Monsters moved, cautiously returning the skull bones to their rightful place. Bones ready. Stitching skin. Saturate patient's wounds with B1 30% pure. Saturating. Continuing saturation. Reconstruction is progressing. Attach the bone. Attaching. Procedure completed. Beginning mending. Everything was going fine until the machine in the corner started bleeping, its frantic rhythm informing everyone about a problem. Cell adaptability failing, the rat alpha roared. 30 seconds until catastrophic failure. Saturate patient with D1 15% pure, Mechanicus ordered calmly. His palms were sweating. He didn't know he could sweat. Saturating. Rejection continues, another roar. 20 seconds. Raise saturation to D1 90% pure. Raising. Saturation raised. Death fact, Mechanicus roared. The rat elder stared at the machine dials with blood-red eyes. No change. What are mixing predictions? Give me numbers for prime mixing rat, snake, kobold. Compatibility to ratling's genus 21%, snake genus 82%, kobold genus 37%. Change saturation to F1 90% snake. Modifying the input. Changing saturation. Raising saturation. Adding snake DNA. Changes, Mechanicus screamed at once. No changes. No change. Wait. Acceptance threshold reached. Mutation occurring. Which type? Naga. Minor. Wait. The mutation isn't stopping. Iron mana levels are off the charts, the rattling wheezed. Subject acquired night vision, reinforced skin, and cold-blooded abilities. What are her mutagen levels? Off the charts still. The chaos continued, as dungeon monsters were trying to understand what exactly happened to their charge, and preferably stop it. The human mage went surprisingly quiet, observing the freshly saved girl who, now awake, easily ripped away the leather restraints and looked around in confusion. She sported never-before-seen golden pupils with vertical irises, and her inhuman traits were easily noticeable in the lust-green scales decorating her body and face. You know? Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did your servants just turn the Gaynard Kingdom royalty into a demi-human? Whoopsie. Charles is going to be so pissed. Master Vincent sighed, cradling his now growing headache. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Sevaren Serberous, Bushmaster 177, HenryTheRed, Casper Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Sevaren Serberous. Thank you very much.